In the vast, uncharted depths of the galaxy, where empires rose and fell like the ebbing tide, one force had stood unchallenged for millennia: the Zevdar Imperium. Their dominion stretched across thousands of star systems, built upon the ruins of species that had dared to resist. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. They were architects of war, sculptors of domination, a civilization forged in the crucible of endless conflict. To the Zevdar, strength was not an advantage, it was law. And through their unyielding doctrine, they had constructed the ultimate military empire, a war machine so vast, so efficient that no species had ever withstood its relentless advance. Until now. It started like any other campaign. A new frontier, an unexplored sector on the fringes of their reach. Their long-range probes detected an upstart civilization, one that had spread across a handful of worlds, primitive by Zevdar standards, but with an unsettling rate of expansion. The species called themselves humans. At first glance, they appeared unremarkable. No exoskeletal armor, no natural weaponry, no bioengineered enhancements. They lacked the genetic advantages of the war-bred races the Zevdar had subjugated before. But as their intelligence reports deepened, a troubling pattern emerged. This species had no homeworld restrictions. They adapted to frozen wastelands, to irradiated hellscapes, to gravity wells that would crush lesser beings. They expanded not with caution, but with a recklessness bordering on madness. Worse still, they fought each other. Constantly. Not for survival, not for territory, but simply because they could. The Imperium strategists reviewed centuries of conflict data, cross-referencing known war cultures to compare tactical methodologies. They found similarities to other expansionist species, yet the humans defied classification. They fought with improvisation, with chaos, with a complete disregard for attrition. Their technological progression was erratic leaps and bounds instead of steady advancements. They did not conquer through calculated precision like the Zevdar. They consumed. They adapted. And when pushed, they evolved. Even so, the Imperium was not concerned. They had crushed civilizations with stronger fleets, shattered empires with greater resources. The humans would be no different. A demonstration of force, a swift planetary incursion. It was a certainty, written in the histories of every war the Imperium had waged. The first fleet arrived in silence, warships the size of cities sliding into orbit over the human colony of Vega Prime. The planet had defenses nothing impressive, just a scatter of railgun batteries and outdated strike craft. The Zevdar expected a surrender transmission within the first hour. Instead, the humans opened fire, not with desperation, not with fear, but with a precision that suggested they had been waiting for this moment. The first Zevdar carrier was struck before it could deploy its invasion forces, its shields overwhelmed in a coordinated volley that left its reactor destabilized. The humans had no hope of victory, but they did not fight for victory. They fought for damage. And damage the Zevdar had never accounted for. Vega Prime burned, as all defiant worlds did. But when the warlords reviewed the battle data, they found something impossible: human pilots outmaneuvering Zevdar strike wings, infantry units deploying tactics that should not have been effective against superior technology. It was an anomaly. And anomalies demanded eradication. The Imperium escalated. The next offensive was larger, overwhelming. 3 fleets descended upon the human systems, entire worlds reduced to cinders. But the deeper the Zevdar pushed, the more they saw the truth. Humanity was not an empire. It was a storm. They did not break under pressure, they thrived in it. They adapted faster than any species the Zevdar had ever encountered, turning defeat into innovation, using every loss as fuel for their war engine. And worst of all, they were relentless. A war that should have ended in days stretched into months. Then years. The Zevdar, for the first time in their long, merciless history, found themselves fighting something they could not predict. Humanity did not follow the rules of conquest. They turned every battlefield into a test, every invasion into a lesson. They stole Zevdar weapons, cracked their encrypted systems, and repurposed their technology in ways that defied logic. The warlords grew uneasy. This was not how it was supposed to unfold. Their simulations projected human collapse within the first cycle, and yet the humans were still fighting. More than that, they were winning. The warlords grew uneasy. This was not how it was supposed to unfold. Their simulations projected human collapse within the first cycle, and yet the humans were still fighting. More than that, they were winning. The Imperium made one final miscalculation. They deployed their supreme war fleet, an armada so vast it had crushed the core worlds of the Ulnar, broken the war beasts of the Threx Dominion. They believed this would be the killing blow. Humanity, however, had already seen the endgame, and they had no intention of playing by the Imperium's rules. As the Zevdar fleet descended upon Earth, their long-range scanners detected something impossible. The humans had abandoned conventional warfare. There were no battle lines, no formations, no defensive fleet waiting in orbit. Instead, deep within the void, in the uncharted sectors beyond Zevdar control, the real war had begun. Humanity had not fought for survival. They had fought for time. And now, time was up. The first sign of something being terribly wrong came when the Zevdar command network went silent. Their vast fleet, poised over Earth, awaited the final order to strike. But that order never came. A creeping unease settled over the warlords as their battlecruisers idled in formation, waiting for direction that would not arrive. Somewhere beyond their reach, in the black void of uncharted space, their empire was unraveling. At first, it was dismissed as a communications failure, an issue to be corrected before the final bombardment. Yet as the minutes stretched into hours, silence remained. No reinforcements, no system updates, not even distress calls. The vast, unshakable war machine of the Zevdar was now an island, cut off from the empire it had built. And in that silence, the humans struck. The attack did not come from Earth. There was no last stand fleet waiting to be annihilated, no desperate gambit from a doomed species. Instead, the Zevdar's own vessels began turning on one another, their systems compromised in ways that should have been impossible. The first ship to go dark was a dreadnought, its automated defenses inexplicably switching targets. Plasma turrets meant for planetary bombardment suddenly rotated inward, opening fire on the warfleet's own formations. Within seconds, the flagship followed its shields flickering out, power cores sabotaged from within. The Zevdar panicked. Not because they were under attack, but because they had no idea how. Across the fleet, once loyal AI systems executed commands that had never been programmed. Weapons locked onto friendly targets. Engines shut down in synchronized waves. Security feeds filled with ghost data, ships registering human borders where none had been detected. The warlords barked orders, demanding countermeasures, but no response came. Their command authority had been stripped, their own empire's technology turned against them. And only then, in the chaos and confusion, did the human fleet arrive. It was not an armada, not a conventional force meant to challenge the Imperium head-on. That had never been humanity's plan. Instead, a collection of vessels emerged from the void-hacked Zevdar warships, now under human control, repurposed and rearmed with stolen technology. A rogue force that should not have existed, yet now dictated the course of battle. From the bridge of a captured battleship, a single human commander transmitted a message directly into the Zevdar fleet's comms. A simple phrase, spoken in a language they barely understood, yet chilling in its implication. Welcome to the new war. The Zevdar had always believed themselves invincible. They had perfected the art of domination, built a civilization on the corpses of those who resisted. But for all their might, they had never fought an enemy like this one, who did not seek to win by force alone, but by understanding the very nature of war itself. Humanity had studied them, dissected their tactics, and learned the one truth the Imperium had never accounted for. Power was not in ships, not in weapons, not in numbers. Power was in control, and the humans had taken it. As Zevdar ships turned against one another, the warlords finally grasped the horror unfolding before them. This was no resistance, no futile uprising. This was something far worse, an invasion from within. A species that had not sought to fight them head-on, but to burrow into the very foundation of their empire and dismantle it piece by piece. The battle over Earth became a slaughter not of humanity, but of the Zevdar themselves. Their own vessels, hijacked and overridden, tore through their formations with ruthless efficiency. Command ships detonated from within, their bridge crews locked out of their own systems. AI-controlled gunships switched sides mid-flight, responding to human directives as if they had always belonged to them. The Imperium, for all its unbreakable strength, had been outmatched not by brute force, but by something they had never considered a threat: human ingenuity. Yet this was only the beginning. The true horror awaited them beyond the stars, where the heart of their empire now lay vulnerable. Because while the Zevdar had committed their fleets to this war, their homeworlds remained unguarded. And in the silence of deep space, humanity's final move was already in motion. They had never fought for Earth. That had only been a distraction. The real war had already been decided long before the Zevdar even realized it had begun. The destruction of the Zevdar fleet above Earth was not the end, only the first step in a larger war that the aliens had never prepared for. As their remaining warships scrambled to regroup, their distress signals echoed into the void, seeking answers from an empire that no longer answered. Their vast network of colonies, once fortified with an unbreakable chain of command, now lay in sudden, unexplainable disarray. Reports arrived in fragments, distorted with panic. Industrial worlds were going dark. Military installations refused entry to their own forces. Entire sectors, once ruled with absolute order, had fallen silent. And then, for the first time in Zevdar history, a new transmission replaced their emergency channels. A single human phrase, spoken in their own imperial dialect, repeating endlessly across every compromised system. "We were never your prey." The warlords, once confident in their species' supremacy, now faced something they had never encountered: an enemy that understood them too well. The humans had not merely infiltrated their systems. They had rewritten the very code of their empire. What had once been a rigid, controlled dominion had become a battlefield of uncertainty. Their war machines no longer obeyed. Their communication relays churned out lies. Every countermeasure they deployed had already been anticipated, every attempt to fight back redirected into deeper chaos. On the surface of a key Zevdar colony, panic spread among the ruling elites. This world, a fortress of supply lines and military coordination, had been deemed untouchable. Yet now, its orbital defenses refused to engage enemy craft. The planetary governor, once a figure of untouchable power, was locked inside his own command center, watching as human-controlled Zevdar ships descended through the atmosphere. His own forces, conditioned for absolute loyalty, awaited orders that no longer came. The ground trembled as dropships landed Zevdar technology, repurposed and piloted by the very species they had sought to exterminate. From the wreckage of their shattered fleets, the surviving warlords had no choice but to retreat. What remained of the Empire's once mighty forces scattered into the void, searching for strongholds that still answered to them. But as they fled, they found the true horror of their situation. The worlds they called home, the core systems that had stood for centuries, were no longer theirs. Human forces had not merely targeted military holdings. They had gone deeper, striking at the foundation of Zevdar rule. The Empire's logistical heart had been compromised before the war had even begun. Then, an even greater shock arrived. A signal broadcasted not by humanity, but by something else entirely. A transmission, old and forgotten, echoing from the deepest reaches of space, spoken in a language that predated even the Zevdar's rise to power. The warlords, desperate for any sign of order, traced its origin to a system long abandoned, marked as a forbidden relic of an age before their dominance. And when they arrived, expecting refuge, they found only ruins and something waiting for them in the dark. This was no mere human deception. Something far older had stirred something the Zevdar had buried in their own history, erased from their records, and convinced themselves could never return. But humanity had found it. And in their war against the Zevdar, they had awakened something even worse. Scattered and desperate, The Zevdar warlords arrived at the ancient system, expecting to find sanctuary. What they discovered instead was an unmarked graveyard of war, a battlefield frozen in time. Hulking remnants of warships, built from unknown alloys, drifted lifelessly through the void. Some bore the unmistakable scars of Zevdar weaponry, proof that their ancestors had once fought here. But others had wounds that no Zevdar technology could have inflicted. Whatever had destroyed these vessels had done so with precision far beyond the Empire's understanding. And then, before they could retreat, the signal changed. It was no longer just an echo of the past. It was answering them. The void ignited with movement. From the blackness of the wreckage, structures long dormant came to life. What had seemed like debris shifted, unfolding with deliberate purpose. Towers of machinery, buried beneath planetary crusts for millennia, rose into the darkness. And then, from the farthest edge of the system, something emerged, something vast. Not a ship, not a fleet, but a construct so large it dwarfed even the Zevdar's greatest war machines. Its surface pulsed with an eerie, rhythmic glow, as if it had only been waiting for a signal to wake. The warlords, mighty conquerors of the stars, felt the weight of something beyond their understanding pressing down upon them. This was not a remnant of their past. It was something that had been left behind, something their ancestors had buried for a reason. But they were not the only ones who had come searching. In the distance, a human war fleet had arrived, moving with quiet, terrifying precision. These were not the battered survivors of Earth's defense, nor the repurposed ships of the fallen Zevdar. These were something new. Humanity had built its own armada in the chaos of warships designed not to defend, but to conquer. They did not hail the Zevdar. They did not demand surrender. They only advanced, weapons locked, moving like hunters closing in on wounded prey. The Zevdar, desperate, attempted to communicate with their ancient enemy. But the massive construct did not answer in words. It answered in action. Beams of unknown energy lanced through space, slicing Zevdar ships apart in an instant. Their shields, once thought impenetrable, collapsed like glass under a hammer. The Empire's warlords, who had once believed themselves the masters of the galaxy, realized they had awoken something that saw them as little more than an infestation. Humanity did not intervene. They did not need to. The war they had started had already achieved its purpose. The Zevdar were broken not by superior firepower alone, but by the unraveling of their own empire, the exposure of their own buried nightmares. And as the ancient construct continued its purge, humanity simply watched, recording everything. They had learned the greatest lesson of war. True victory was not in destruction, but in control. The Zevdar had ruled through domination, fear, and subjugation. Humanity had won by making them obsolete. As the last of the Zevdar ships tried to flee, the ancient construct turned its gaze upon the human fleet. For a moment, silence stretched across the void. And then, the massive entity powered down. It did not see humans as a threat. It did not see them as anything at all. It had fulfilled its purpose and returned to its slumber. In the aftermath, what remained of the Zevdar Empire was nothing but scattered warbands, clinging to dying worlds with no leadership, no unity, and no future. Humanity, now the dominant force in the galaxy, did not claim their throne with fanfare or declarations. They simply moved forward, expanding, evolving, and ensuring that the Zevdar name would be nothing more than a cautionary tale whispered among the stars. And as the last remnants of the Empire crumbled into the shadows, humanity pressed onward, because for them, this was only the beginning.